Okay, so welcome to another episode of Learning for Truth and Love. Today, our guest is Dr. Tiara Worsley, and Dr. Tiara Worsley is a STEM education coordinator at Northern Virginia Community College. She graduated with her bachelor's in agricultural and environmental technology, and with her PhD in education studies with a focus on STEM education. But I'm going to have you tell a little bit about yourself before we get started. But I really want to say we're in for a treat today. I invited Dr. Worsley to join us today because when we're thinking about learning and education, one of the things that come up is what are some options for students who might be interested in STEM, but maybe don't want to go the traditional route? That's what our talk is going to be today. And we'll start by having Dr. Worsley talk about herself. Welcome.
Yes, thank you so much. Um, yes, when I was younger, my absolute favorite thing to do was always take things apart and put them back together to the dismay of my mom. She used to always say, and I quoted this in my dissertation, she used to always tell me, those hands better make you some money one day because they always on something. And now I love to quote her at all times because I'm like, it's working. It is. It's what I do. I keep my hands on things. I teach other kids how to get their hands on things and just understanding how it works. And a lot of that was rooted in community for me because with my dad's side of the family, the Worsley side, they were very much known for being fixers.
Mm.
And I always just like held this to my heart because within the community, my dad's side, they weren't people who, had degrees or had gone to school for something specific. They just had this niche for understanding and knowing. They just had engineering in them inherently. I remember my uncle, he was a carpenter, like he could build you a deck. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think he ever took a class about it, but he just knew. My dad was, my dad and my uncle, they're really good with cars and just, at any point, if I had a question about how to fix something, usually between, me and my dad, we can figure it out. And, when, as I was growing up, I heard this from other people and how they would say, if you give it to one of them and they can't fix it, it might actually be broke. And he just might have to replace it. And I took that with me because in school, I quickly learned it was almost this like separation of who I was. Like there was a version of me at school, and then there was this version of me at home. And so at school, academics wise, I always did great. I was considered an AB student, and in school, I inherently picked up that in school, as a Black girl in school, you just need to get your grades, be quiet, don't bother anyone, and just get through it. And there's a system because you get tests and everything is just how much you can memorize and how you perform on the test. So at school, that was how I got through it. Give me the material, let me review the material, let me perform on the test, and then get through it. And so that was kind of my mantra at school. I knew there wasn't really an outlet for, "Oh, what about doing this?" or, pushing the boundaries. I just wanted to get through it and I knew the method. But then
Mm-hmm.
at home, I felt like I could explore and really push, like, but why are we doing that? And, there were people to engage in that with me. My family would do it all the time, especially my mom. She
Mm-hmm.
would always, push those questions on me. If I got stumped on something, she'd be
Wow.
like, well, what's the problem? Well, what do you think you should do? Well, do you need
Absolutely.
help with that? And also with that, I learned that, there's no shame in asking for help because my mom never hesitated to pick up the phone
Mm.
and she'd call anyone she knew. And she said, look, my baby's smart. I don't know what she's doing, but can you help with this? Can you at least get me to this step? I can call somebody else, but can you help me out? And so from them, I learned, there's no shame in asking for help when you need it. You never know who has the expertise because some of these people my mom would call, again, they haven't had the opportunity to go on to college or anything, but they're so good in what they know that, I just quickly learned, hey, anybody can know what to do and it doesn't really matter what comes after their name or before their name. Like knowledge is everywhere. And then I quickly learned how to like utilize kind of that um, I think also calls it like the cultural capital of your community. Well, I knew how to leverage that because I had grown up in it and there was never any shame about it. If you don't know, ask someone. There's no problem in doing that because they can probably help you. And, knowing who to call to solve an issue was also a really big thing to utilize because even when I started doing like my school projects,
Mhm.
I would say probably any project I did was a community effort because I'm pretty sure at least 8 to 10 people in the family had a hand on it.
Yeah.
My mom always made sure I was leading it and I was
Plays a lot.
there as it was happening. But she was like, no, you can get help, but you need to be there too. And I feel like, but I'm not doing this part. She was like, I know that, but it's your project. It's okay to
Mhm.
get help, but you need to be there too. So
Wow.
a lot of these lessons I had instilled in me. So by the time, I was getting into high school, the big thing is where are you going to go to school? Where are you going to study? And originally, I wanted to be a dentist because I like going to my pediatric dentist. I just thought it was the funnest thing because you got toys at the end.
Right.
And
Sorry a lot.
yes, that's what it felt like to me. I was like, oh, this is cool because from my experience, they're just counting teeth and just brushing mine. So it seems great.
So you change
And
your
then I did change my mind. So during the summers, I would come up to DC and stay with my cousin, and she was a dentist. And when the moment I said I wanted to be a dentist, my parents were like, "Oh, we have a cousin." I was like, "We have a cousin who's a dentist?" You're like, "Yeah."
a lot of
So
money there for you.
yeah, so they would bring me up for the summer, and she would let me go in her office and just kind of like watch and shadow her, so I could
Mhm.
just really see what the job was. One of the things I learned because her dental office was for everyone, so kids to adults. And because I was there so much, I was seeing way more of this is actually what a dentist does.
Right. Reality.
It was like, hmm. And, I didn't hate it, but I was, you're just in that phase of like, what do I do? Because, like I tell other students, because this is what I thought, because, this is common for us when we're
Mhm.
like first generation students and we have no idea what college really means, is you feel like you're making a decision for the rest of your life.
Right.
And you feel like whatever you choose, that's what it is, and you have to stick with it.
Mhm.
And so there was a part of me that was like, oh man, I've committed to dentistry. Can't switch. I committed. Everyone knows I want to do it.
Wait,
And
how old?
I think in fifth grade, I kind of declared I wanted to be a dentist. And then when I got into high school, I had seen the shift, but I didn't want to admit to it because everyone had committed to, she's going to be a dentist. And, when you would talk to people, like, oh, what do you want to do? Or, people who had known me my whole life. And then the conversation started coming up like, oh, but you're good with your hands. Have you considered engineering? And I was like, well, no, I didn't think of it because in my head, why do you need a degree to be good at fixing things? My whole family does it, and none of them have degrees. And so I hadn't considered it. And then I started looking into engineering, and I said, ooh, like I think this might be an option as well. And at the time, let's see, I was in high school from like 2004 to 2009. STEM wasn't really a buzzword back then.
Mhm.
I would say it was mainly focused on engineering, but we didn't really have a STEM program where I was at. So I didn't have as much exposure at school, but at home, I would do these things all the time just by like hanging
Yeah.
with the family.
Nice. The opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, so I got myself together and I made the switch. I was like, yeah, I think I want to do engineering. I switched over and I went to NC State and I wanted to go into mechanical engineering. That was my initial major. Well, I was so happy that I got in because how our high school was set up, it's almost like they were like three tracks. Are you going to university? Are you maybe going to go to a community college, or are we kind of going to push you to trades? And once they kind of tracked you, they never told you about the other option. They were just like, you're on a university path. Like, we have no need to tell you about a community college or a trade because you're going to university. We have
Mhm.
no need for the other ones. And so when, it's kind of like the thing as a senior, you're like, oh, where are you going? Where are you going? And I remember for us, if you got into NC State or Chapel Hill, that was a huge deal because for us, those were like the hardest two within North Carolina to get into. And then, like, who really even thinks about going to Duke? Maybe just valedictorians. And then some other people, like, the fallback would be if I don't make it to these two, I'll just do like ECU, Eastern Carolina. And that was like how our mantra was about these schools. And I remember saying, like, oh, yeah, I'm going to NC State. And, students I have literally been in class with my whole life, we've been in the same honors classes. They're like, you got into state? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, I didn't think you were like, oh, I didn't know you were like that good. I was like, I've been in class with you the whole time. What's different? I've been in honors class sitting with you since sixth grade, so what's different? I was like, oh, like, and for engineering? Oh, they're like, I didn't know you were that smart. It goes to show you just how quietly I was just getting through to the point where I had kind of made myself invisible academically to people
Wow.
I've been with for 6 years. Yeah. And so then I enter the big world of college. And I'm like, all right, we have to make the community proud
Mm.
because we are representing college for more people than we can count. Everyone has like, I'm like I don't know the word for it, but it's like everyone has like rested their hopes in me to go forth. And
Mhm.
I'm ready, I'm excited. And then, just not understanding the realities of college coming from a small town. This was my first dose of reality. I would like to say this is where my rose colored glasses got taken off because you realize the whole world is not about community in the same way that you have understood and come to know community. And so it's really kind of like you're on your own
Mhm.
and then you find your other community, people who support you. So for me, I was lucky enough to be a part of they called it STP at the time. It was a summer transition program
Mhm.
for students who were any minority students that were going into engineering. And what they did was we were able to go ahead and sign up we started summer school basically. So we got exposed to, okay, you're going to do a math. And we did like a chemistry kind of overview where they're like, chemistry is a tough class. Everyone takes chemistry just so they can be prepared when they actually do the class. And they told us, they said, because when the semester starts, they were like, it's really going to be a lot of people and not a lot of them are going to look like you. So we try to go ahead and get you set up with some people.
Mhm.
And you hear them, but you don't really get it until it starts. And to really put it in perspective, like my hometown where I grew up, we're like 1,200 people. 12.
Mhm.
I'm learning when I got to college, people have graduation classes that big. And I'm like, what? We had maybe 200 in our graduating class, or maybe
What was
no, not even 200. I think 130.
Yeah. What was the
Yeah, that was
demographics?
my high school. To me, it felt like an even split, like a third Hispanic, a third Black, and a third white. To
Mm.
me,
Just curious. Yeah.
like
Go
I
ahead.
never struggled to see people that look like me. I was like, okay, like to me, it just felt like an even third spread.
Mhm.
And that's just who we had. And so then, transitioning into NC State, who's like 34,000 students, it feels like it's, living in the capital city. You're at this college with so many students. It's just overwhelming. It's like, whoa. And then,
Mhm.
you go to class and I'm used to being the only person that looks like me in my class. So that didn't feel overwhelming. It was just like, okay, kind of back in my wheelhouse now. I'm used to this. But just the amount of people, it was more the size of the classes that were just kind of like, whoa, this is different. But luckily, we had our group and, we sat together, did our classes together. And
Different. Different how? Different how in terms of the number of people that were different. Was it intimidating, overwhelming? Like.
yeah, I would say for me, again, because the classes I had been in, not seeing someone that looked like me, or maybe it being limited to like, there's maybe three or less of us. Like, unfortunately, that was normal to me.
Mhm.
But having a class where there's like 90 students, that was overwhelming to me.
Mm.
I'm used to our teachers know us. And now suddenly these teachers kind of don't care because there's 100 of you. Unless you make yourself known to them, they don't know you. And, then there's some classes where you have 300 people registered. You have some classes where, there's 100 people. It's rare you ever got a small class of just the
Typical.
number of people
Yeah.
was new to me because I'm used to like very tight knit closeness. And so now everything was different. So it was like, unless you really put forth the effort to, make yourself known, stand up for yourself, like you're just going to fade into the background. And, this was like me coming to understand this is life outside of your bubble. This is life. You kind of are just a person among others. And I was grappling with that, trying to do well in classes. And there's this new social life happening. You have a new friend group. So there's just all these things in the mix where I'll tell students now, it's like sometimes the overwhelming part of college isn't just the class, it's just the whole newness of everything if you're not used to it, like especially for me, because we have to go into another town to do big things and events. I'm just used to small town living. And I would say getting into year 2 is where it got challenging. And for me, the challenge was, I've never been one to do bad in classes because, I have my system. You give me the material, I study it, I
Yeah.
do the test, pass. And now that system wasn't working and I'm not one to give up. So I'm trying to find every avenue like, oh, where's tutoring? Let me sign up for tutoring. Well, let me make sure I'm in these study groups. And the course was physics. I'll never forget. I still have a hate relationship with physics. And remembered I was really battling with myself. I was like, I cannot be this stupid. Like, understand this material, but this test just seems to never match up.
Yeah.
And I think I repeated that course 3 or 4 times.
Wow.
The issue I was really taking with it is because the way engineering is set up is if you don't pass. So basically, the first 2 years they try to weed you out, like who's really got the goods to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, but I'm doing well in every other class, but I'm not doing good here. And I'm not like putting blame on others. It's like, what are you doing to not work harder? Like, I'm completely taking this on. And I'm seeing other people struggle because, we were able to see the grade distributions. And you're like, you've got 100 people in here and only 5 got an A. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then, like, the number of people with D's, F's is 60, 70. So I'm like, it can't just be me. But
No.
I don't really know how to express what's happening. I'm just frustrated. I didn't have the words for it at the time, but what it was I was just getting depressed in my own academics because I know that I can't be a mechanical engineer without this. And again, like I said, that decision feels like you are bound to it when you call it. And I didn't want to be the one to be the failure when everyone had their like hopes on me. I didn't want to be the one. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And the other thing in my head was, some people are like, oh, you can just switch majors. But again, I'm a first generation student. So what I know of college is basically what I see on TV. And I'm like, no, switching majors is for people who are not serious about what they're studying in college. Or it's always a girl chasing a boy. And I'm not doing any of that. Like, I'm very serious and I'm not chasing a boy. Because media always portrayed girls in majors doing these things.
Yeah.
It was like, they're either like really rich families and they're like, oh, I think I'll study this, I'll study that, I'll study this. It's like, no, I have no time for that, I have no money for that. Or they're changing their majors based on a relationship. And I'm like, no, I just want to do engineering for me. And I was just taking this in to the point where I didn't even realize how like down and out I was about it. And apparently my body tried to save me by blocking it out. And my mom told me, she said, no, I called you and I heard it in your voice that something was going on. And she said she came up and just took me out to get me out of my own head. And I can't remember this at all to save me because clearly my body blocked it out. But she told me, she was like, she asked, she said, is there anything you can do? And I was like, I can't do anything if I don't pass this class. Like, it's done. I can't do engineering. And she said, okay, I'll tell you what, if you try everything you can try and you don't figure it out, or there's nothing for you to do, she was like, we'll come up here, we'll pack you up, we'll bring you home. She was like, it's okay. You're not a failure.
Yeah.
You've done
Nice.
excellent. Like, it's
Mhm.
fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
We can find something else.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, so, you go in your chain of command. So first I talked to the undergraduate advisor in mechanical engineering, and this one interaction with that lady, like, it stung me for life, just by the unfazedness of her. Because
Mhm.
again, I'm coming from a community where when people need help, you help. You don't,
Mhm.
you just offer it. And I went into her office, and, I also don't believe in, well, you need to do all you can do. I believe in looking at myself first, like,
Mhm.
what can I do to fix this? So I went into her office, made my appointment. I'm like, hi, I'm really struggling with this one course. I was like, here's what I've been doing. Like, I've signed up for the tutoring. I've talked to the professor. I've been in the study group. I want to make a good case for her. Like, I want you to see that I'm trying.
Mhm.
And I'm telling her all these things. And then, I pause because now it's the point where, all right, you tell me what else I need to do, because
Mhm.
this is what you know. I remember she was just kind of looking out her window, drinking her coffee. She had not really made any eye contact with me. And she's just like, engineering's not for everyone. You're in a physics-based major, so, if you can't physics, maybe you should drop it.
Yeah.
And, like, that was it. And
Sounds familiar.
I was like, what? No. I was like, no, I don't want to, like, drop engineering. I'm just like, what else can I do? And that was just really end of conversation, because a lot of it is kind of, engineering is so serious at NC State. It's like, if they don't see it in you, they're like dismissing you,
Mhm.
because it's like you don't matter until you matriculate and you're
Well.
officially into the major. And so I just left the office like, you had nothing else for me to do. Like, this can't just be over and
Hmm.
done. And I just sat with it for like a week. I was like, what am I supposed to do? You're this person who's supposed to help. And so I paused for a minute, and then I saw the general engineering undergraduate advisor. And not a super emotional person, but like at the moment I stepped in her office, she like looked at me. She was like, well, hey, Orange, how can I help you? And I just cried in this lady's office. I was like, what is wrong with me? Why am I crying? This is so unprofessional. And she came from her desk. She sat with me. She was like, it's okay. She gave me tissues. She just sat with me. And then I calmed down, and she said, are you ready? And I said, yeah, I'm ready. Like, thank you. And she goes, okay. She said, so what's happening? And I told her, I was like, this is what's happening with this course. And she said, she was like, that's pretty common. She was like, yeah, something's up with that course. She's like, it's very common. You are not alone.
Hmm.
I was like, yeah. And I said, so I was like, I've basically been told I can't stay in mechanical engineering. So, like, is there another engineering I could do? And she paused, and she said, well, before I help you, tell me why you chose engineering. Like, why did you want to get into engineering?
Mhm.
And I told her, I said, I'm good with my hands. Like, I'm so good with my hands. That's why I chose engineering. And I said, I love taking things apart. I love putting them back together. Like, I just love all aspects of it. Anything hands on, that is what I love to do. And she said, okay. She said, well, tell me this. She's like, I think I know where you should be. But she said, she said, if I switch you to this major, how much is it going to matter to you that you be an engineer? You have that title. How much does it matter to you? If it's
Mhm.
exactly what you said you wanted to do. Like, if it's hands on and I get to do that, I don't care if I'm called an engineer. I don't care. And she said,
Mhm.
okay, well, we have an engineering technology major. She said it's in the biological and agricultural department.
Mhm.
She said, it sounds like exactly what you want to do.
Mhm.
She said, I tell you what, like, you're going to go over there, you're going to talk to their advisor. I'm going to send him an email. I'm going to suggest you try it out for a semester. We'll get you in some courses.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, if it doesn't work out in that semester, come back here. We'll figure out what else you can do. But try that out. She was like, sounds like it's what you want. Go talk to the advisor over there, do this. We'll see how it goes. Okay. And I switched that semester. So I tried out, now I was in the bio and ag department, and I tried it out for a semester. And it was just like I was a different person. Like the way the stress melted off of me, I was thriving in class. I remember at the end of the semester when the grades came out, I was like, I think you gave me the wrong one. And he's like, what's wrong with it? I was like, I'm not dean. Like, there's no dean on my list. And he's like, no, you made the dean's list. And I was like, I made the dean's list. What do you mean? Because I had just improved so much. And that whole lesson taught me it's okay if you have to shift plans, and we really need to listen to what students want to do before
Mm-hmm.
we make suggestions, like hear them out and
Mm-hmm.
really lay out the options for them and what they need. And when I switched, I was just so excited. I was like, oh man, this is like the perfect major for me. Like I would have taken that major up into a master's, PhD. Because I loved it. My favorite class was shop. I got to learn to weld and like
Mm.
drill press. I just loved it, and I was thriving. Like
Wow.
I felt like I had regained myself. I was in such a better place mentally that it just trickled into every other aspect. And it taught me, sometimes just certain things don't matter, because if you're doing, if you are where you should be, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. Things will work themselves out. So, I finished, and at the time I was like, oh, my dream is just to go work for John Deere. It's all I want to do. Just go work on tractors and live life. It'll be great. And at the time I had gotten into my like first study abroad,
Mm-hmm.
and I had left the country for the first time because I was very adamant I did not need to leave the country, but I did a study abroad, and then that changed everything. So I said, oh, maybe I like want to work on tractors abroad. This could be a career. I said, I think I'm going to go back and do my master's, but there's no master's for that program. So I was like, what's the closest thing I could do? So I went to natural resources,
Mm-hmm.
and that advisor suggested to me, she said, well, if you are considering working international, she said, I suggest you do the Master's International Peace Corps program. I was like,
Mm.
oh, does Peace Corps really exist? I just heard it that one time in Dirty Dancing. Like, do they still exist? Like, what is it? Because Peace Corps did not have a promo. And I just heard of it through random shows.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, yeah, go talk to the recruiter and see if it's something you're into. Because she's like, if you're looking at working, a foreign service, you get a language, it's 2 years, and you're government funded. I was like, okay. So I said yes. Then I did 3 semesters of my master's, and then went into the Peace Corps. And at that time, I had gotten into teaching because I got my first internship, and it was environmental education. And I had started like working with youth. I don't know, I just had a knack for it in my head. It just felt like these are the things you should do when teaching kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked working with them. And then when I had left to go do my service in Peru, again, I was myself working at the elementary school. And I started off with English teaching, mainly because my language level was not that great. But I said, you know what? I know all the English words, even with my bare minimum Spanish, I can probably do this. And so I'd get myself together every day and go work with the kids on their English words.
Mm-hmm.
And in working with them, I was also realizing that for a lot of them, working with me was kind of their first, if maybe not their only opportunity to gain access to certain courses that they didn't have to pay for. Because, in America, we're used to just seeing such different people, and we understand like how what you look like can kind of set you up for certain things. Because
Mm-hmm.
we've grown up in that, we know that. But in Peru, there's way more just like yes, there's diversity, but it's like it doesn't look the same as it does in the US. And so I was like, oh, like if everyone kind of is almost the same shade, like, how do you, like, what does the system look like then? Like, how to, like, who gets
Right.
attacked, who doesn't? Because I'm used to seeing different shades and I know how the system works
Mm-hmm.
in that, in that way in the US. I'm like, huh, like, how does it work here? And I quickly learned it's more like economic status. Like, okay, fine. You're all the same shade. Economically, where do you fall? So then, like, the other systems that play. And I'm like, here we go. So a lot of the students I worked with, they weren't the students that were always chosen or, ones that were recommended to do programs because a lot of these students, like, for all purposes, they were considered like just poor. But because I made everything I did free, I didn't charge for it. They finally had the opportunity to join in on these classes. And they were just so excited that they got the opportunity. And I'd always say, if they're willing to come out here, if they make it work, the least I can do is teach them and not be
Mm-hmm.
worried about, you don't need to spend your money to come out here. Like, it's okay. I'm like, no, if they're willing to come out here, if that's the only money they have and they just want to come out here and learn English for 2 hours, like, I'm going to teach them for 2 hours. I'm just going to do it because they've already let me know it's important to them. So I'm going to do it. And in working with them, again, I have no teacher training. This is just purely what I've learned
Mm-hmm.
because children that normally didn't get opportunities were given opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
show what they know and excel. Like, they thrived. And some of the teachers that even say, like, oh, I didn't even think that student cared that much about what they were learning. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, they're my best ones. They're
Absolutely.
very into what we're doing because I do the most English teaching and, like, environmental education. And, they took it upon themselves to do reports. And I was like, oh, you don't have to do a report. They're like, no, I just want to learn more. The first time I've gotten to learn about this, even with that, building curriculum for them, because they give us curriculum and they explain a lot of the environmental causes in Peru. But what I was realizing is, being an environmental volunteer, a lot of the environmental work is catered towards the jungle. And then for me, I was living on the coast in, like, a desert region. And I'm like, yeah, it's all great to learn about the jungle, but for most of these kids, they are absolutely never going to go to the jungle in their life. For most of them, they're only going to be in this region.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, we can't discount the desert as an environmental place. Like, is it the prettiest thing? No, in comparison to the jungle, but there's still environmental things happening that
Mm-hmm.
kids need to realize their environment matters too. So I would
Absolutely.
shift the worksheets. I'd, like, put birds in that they would see. 'Cause they're never going to see a parrot, but they might see this bird that looks like a raven. They're going to see that bird. They're not going to see these huge lush trees, but they will see they'll see a cactus. They'll see palms. So I would always switch out examples for them, and they look at it and be like, "I know all of this," and I'm like, "Good." And they're like, "Wait, is it still environmental? Because it looks like here." I'm like, "Well, it should look like here. You have environmental things here. It doesn't always have to be the jungle." And they're like, "Oh, we have an environment too." You do. It matters. They're like, okay. So
Mm-hmm.
they're building these connections, and I was giving them the platform to say, you're an expert. You live here. I'm
Mm-hmm.
new. I don't know all the answers. I'm just here to support you. So, like, my teaching method was always take a step back and just give them some time and a platform to say what they know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then with that, when I came back here to the States, I took a lot of those lessons with me. And then when I decided to do the PhD program, once again, I was working with youth in Boys and Girls Club. And at the time when I started at a refugee center, and, again, going on that same method, like, tell me what you know. Because what I was learning is, you know, kids that aren't given opportunities, regardless of what that looks like, for a lot of them, they're going through the same thing. And it almost doesn't matter where they are. Like, every kid I taught in Peru, they're going through these same issues that these kids here in the US are going through. Like, they're similar. And a lot of them just aren't given a chance. And for them, they don't want to speak up because they think they're wrong. They think their thoughts
Mm-hmm.
don't matter. And above all else, they don't want to look stupid in front of their friends or their teachers. So they will hold their silence because they don't want to look bad. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you finally give them a platform and say, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay, tell me what you know, what you have to say matters. And
Mm-hmm.
they slowly break down barriers. And as they break down these barriers, you see them take off in confidence because now they realize, like, I've been validated kind of by someone I care about, and I take them to be an expert. So them validating me is now making me feel like I have something to say. I do know what I'm talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
also normalizing for them when they're wrong. I'm like, you're going to be wrong. That's life. No one is always right. I was like, as smart as you think I am, I get things wrong, but I normalized it for them. I was like, let's go look it up. And they're like, you don't know. I was like, I don't know, but let's look it up. Like, I show them how to do their own research. I'm like, just like you go to YouTube for music videos, you can go to YouTube and figure out how to fix something. And I'm like, I can. I'm like, yeah, it has everything. And just normalizing that for them, setting an example, you just saw them kind of thrive. Because I know a big part of the like STEM education discussion today is always, how do we get them interested? There's such a disparity. Minoritized youth, they're just not interested. And I'm like, well, first we need to shift the question. I was like, I'm not making them interested. They're already interested. I'm just giving them a way to show their interest. That's not traditional or based on a test like it normally is. I
You're
said they just
starting,
have other ways to express themselves.
yeah, you're starting from their
What would
interest.
you say? Yeah, I started from their interest. I said, and it's not easy. It takes time. Like I said, they just honestly they want to make sure you're not going to make fun of them. Others won't make fun of them. And I said, I make that a hard rule. We're not laughing at anyone in here because all of you have hit a point where you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. I tell y'all when I don't know. And as you see them thrive, I'm like, let's shift on that. Let's look at maybe how we can get people who understand like how to unlock what they have. And say, yeah, maybe they're not getting an A on a biology test. It doesn't mean they're not interested in like these biological elements. Maybe the test just isn't the way it works out for them. Doesn't mean they're not interested. Maybe the
Mm-hmm.
test is just not the best way for them to show it.
Yeah.
And in working with all of them and too, at my experience, like I've just taken taken that to heart. So now when I'm always working with students, I offer advice, but at the same time, I always ask, you know, what is it you're interested in? And I
Mm-hmm.
also let them know, if you don't know, that's a valid answer as well. You don't have to know. Are you sure? I'm like, yeah, you don't have to know. Because in my role now, I work with the first year students at a community college. And for a lot of them, you can just see it in their face. They're like, I know I'm supposed to be in college and just, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. This is just a starting point. If in 2 years you feel this ain't for me, but you can always go back to school.
Mm-hmm.
You can always shift careers because what I like that we get to do with them is put them in front of people who they can actually see what a career is. And when I was telling them like, oh, can you share your pathway? And their biggest takeaway has been they've actually heard now from multiple people the path isn't straight and narrow. It might have a lot of turns, jumps. They're like, oh, like you're a police officer and now you're the lead engineer. I just decided to come back and start my way up and train. I was like, yeah, whatever you choose to do, it's not permanent. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can shift and it's okay. And I told them about my college decision. I said that was the first time I was forced into really changing my mind. And I said it was the most needed way for me to do it. I was almost blocked in. It was like, you can't go forward unless you change your mind and how you see this. And then I let go. And from that, like, since then, like, maybe this plan won't work, but that's okay. How can we pivot and make it work?
Wow. Absolutely. Wow. There's so much in there you said, and there's so many questions I have.
Yes.
Some of the questions I'm going to withhold because you started talking about your college, the college role, and I thought, it'd be nice to shift there. But I mean, this is a perfect illustration. You said everything that actually is an extension of what I'm going to be doing in the future, right? Because I have a physics project that I'm excited to talk about and related to learning. I'm not going to say it all here. I want to hear more about from you, but wow. And so I am curious though, before I ask this question, I am curious though, because you mentioned that in a lot of ways that, the students you worked with in Peru are very similar to the students here. So I am curious about, if there were other similarities you observed that you hadn't mentioned. But I also wanted to talk more about, so one of the things that I've done is work with STEM students who are not, STEM majors in a project that I've had with the U.S. Department of Ed. And so one of the things I found, especially for students in computer science, the ones who did well, who had some background, they might have coded or did other things before. And I always thought it'd be so amazing. And then the ones that didn't have the background yet, who were starting, was really a struggle, right? Without having had a taste of it before coming to college. But I always thought it'd be so nice to have a major where there's something practical, obviously hands-on, as well as, what you're learning. Because I do think the college education is important, teaching you how to think. But just listen to your description of childhood. I mean, wow, talk about critical thinking, problem solving, lessons learned. And so I want to start talking about you in terms of your role. What are some options that students have, for example, the community college? What have you seen about, how it meshes with their interests? So tell us about that experience. Yeah. So what are some opportunities?
How it meshes with their interest or my interest?
Well, just talk about. Well, I want to leave it open ended. Talk about your new, in terms of your position now. What are students' experiences like? What comes up, as they pursue the different programs? I know you and I have talked about it. I don't want to say which ones we've talked about. I just want to see what comes up for you.
Yeah. What I have noticed in this current role is that for a lot of students, I'll say like two things. One, I don't think they're really having a college conversation with someone. And what I mean by that is, there is the wonderfulness of like, oh my God, I'm going to college. And then there is all the things that get you to college. So, this kind of like, just turning in forms. What else do I need for FAFSA? And, once you're in a major, like, how does it work? Because for high school, basically all of K-12, everything's kind of been chosen for you. Like you're following on this path. Usually the most you're choosing is the electives you want to take. And sometimes that's even within a path, like, oh, are you going arts? Well, here's your courses. Are you doing this? Well, here's your courses. A lot of it's just given. And there's not too much thinking about it. Like they just set you up on a path and you go for it. For a lot of the students, now it's all of a sudden, you kind of been this child going on, and then college is the first time where you're automatically like, well, you're the adult, do it. And it's just a lot of decisions that students aren't used to. So they're so overwhelmed in just, what do I do? And I would say when I was in that space, like I was way more of a, I don't have anyone in the family that I can just call and ask about what is this, what is that. I'm figuring out real time with my parents. But I knew how to use my resources. So I was like, all right, I guess I need to call the admissions office and figure this out. I guess I need to call this office and figure it out. And anyone who's ever called any college offices, that's a task within itself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like I was very much a go-getter. Like I need to do this to get this information. And what I've noticed is like there's definitely a shift with this newer generation. It's like if they don't know, there's less inclination to like go seek it out. They just kind of like, so what do I do? Like, well, you need to go to the office and ask questions. But what do I ask? You need to ask them about FAFSA.
Right.
But like, where do I go? And I'm like, Google it does tell you where the offices are. And I think a lot of it has just been this shift that there's such a focus on like, we really want you to excel in your studies. Like I said, the kids today so much smarter, but also kind of just don't know how to be independent.
Right. Well,
like, academic wise, they are thriving. They're so much further than I was. But I was like, good Lord, they just had to do 2 days by themselves. I don't know if they could make it outside with like real decisions.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've noticed that like there's a lot of you need to go here, you need to do this, just go to the office, just ask, like, I want you to take some responsibility in this too. And there's just a hesitancy.
Mm-hmm.
But the more you push them, like, okay, you need to go, they're like, oh, okay, I figured it out. And I'm like, good. Now to
Wow.
the next part.
Oh my gosh. That's another whole conversation that I plan to have
Yeah.
because I've
Yeah.
also observed that, and I also observed it even being a parent and seeing how, I raise my son or, my son's friends and the level of empowerment. And it's one of those things you don't know what you don't know, especially you're an apprentice of this world. And so the question is, what is the world training you? And, are you sitting down there or whatever it is you're doing? I'm excited to have a whole conversation about that. But I'm curious too. So why do students choose your program? Like, why do they choose your program, for example, instead of going into, 4-year college?
Yeah. So I would say for the program that we are currently running, so the one I mainly oversee is the Engineering Technology Career Scholars Program. And a big part of that is within the Northern Virginia area, there's a huge need for technicians, especially, Northern Virginia's hubs for data centers. They need people, they need techs to help run these buildings because there's like two sides of it. There's the maintenance of the building so it can sustain, but then there's also, the working with the data within the data center. And what we focus on is more so that technician role. And then also kind of like with semiconductor manufacturers, so like making chips, we focus on students being technicians. And I would say a big question for these students when they enter the program is some of them want to go into engineering. And so they'll hear engineering tech and they'll just key in on it and be like, oh, that might be what I need to do. And what I'm learning is because I was a part of this, I'm like, I think we need to shift how we describe engineers and engineering techs. Because I said the pure definition of engineering technology is you doing hands-on engineering work, which K-12 drills on us. They're like, oh, if you're doing engineering, you're doing hands-on. And the reality is when you get to college, it's usually not as hands-on as people think it is. And so one of my big things is just kind of explaining to them, this is what engineering is. This is what engineering technology is.
Mm.
I'm not saying one is bad, but so you understand the difference. And like, with engineering techs, they have a skill set that can go anywhere. Cause I'm like, any building has to be maintained.
Mm-hmm.
All buildings have to be maintained. I was like, hospitals have their tech staff, data centers have their tech staff, like everyone, whether they're calling in people or they're already on call, they have to have technicians because things break and they need them fixed. I'm like, hospitals can't go without electricity. You've got too many people on machines. I said, so believe me, they've got their electricians on call. And what we're showing them is just a different pathway because for a lot of them, they're not going to be told to go be an electrician or to be an HVAC or, they're not going to be told to go seek out those majors. They're more than likely will be told to go be an electrical engineer, go be a mechanical engineer. And while that's great, you can do that. There's also other ways to get into it. So like even for me, like I was told, hey, it's probably not going to be, you won't be an engineer. I'm like, oh, that's fine. This is hands on. This is what I know. This is what I'm good at. And another thing that a lot of the students have learned when they go visit these industry places, when people talk to them about their pathways, they're hearing people say with an associate's degree, they're like, oh, yeah, now I'm the lead engineer. So I'm like, even who gets called an engineer has now shifted and it's
Mm.
way more nuanced than what it
Mm-hmm.
used to be because we've even heard people from like, kind of way back 80s, they'll say, oh yeah, I'm the lead engineer. Like I didn't really go to school for it, but I was able to take on enough jobs where I got the experience. And so
Mm-hmm.
I became the engineer. So then, I try to explain to them there's like, the PE, the professional engineer. But I'm like, if the title is really what you're after, you have people here letting you can get the title and
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to have that 4-year degree. So I think a lot of a lot of like what has been considered status is now getting shifted.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say for better or for worse. It's saying, and I don't think people are as aware of how it's shifting. So when we are explaining this to these students, we're not just telling them, we're also showing them like, here is a pathway. Also, we're going to let you talk to the people who have done this pathway. Also, we're going to let you see the daily job of what someone in their pathway does. Like, here's the track. And also with that, they're seeing, oh, there's way more opportunities than I thought. Because for some of them, they just didn't even know it was an option. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, yeah, that really fits what I want to do. I didn't even know that was a choice. It's like, yeah, there's many options. Like a lot of times you have to seek the information out. But I'm like, pretty much any field, it's never just straight and narrow as it seems. There's usually some type of nuance or pivot with any role. And
Mm-hmm.
so just putting them in contact with these people has proven super helpful for them where they can, ask the real questions they want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what does it look like to work here? So would I start off making like they'll tell them, yeah, these are jobs where you're going to start off with this salary. Which caveat to that, we also understand, most of them are still living at home. They don't understand what salary is, and they don't know what's considered a good salary, a minimum salary. We
Mm-hmm.
asked them one time, like, what would you say is a good salary? And the amount of them that were like 300,000. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, cool. I was like, I guess we're all poor then. It's like, I'll tell anyone, if you're like teaching or mentoring, it is always more than the task at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, aside from getting them to the career, there's like the emotional labor of this work where they're overwhelmed, they're stressed, it's new. The first time, we're asking them, hey, you're going to need this tax form to turn your FAFSA in.
Mm-hmm.
What's a tax form? Where do I get it? There's, I think sometimes like the emotional, mental side of supporting students can get lost in the mix because everyone focuses on academics.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, they might fail a class. It's not that they're not good enough to do this program, but that happens. And I'm like, not enough people talk about it, but it happens. People
Mm-hmm.
fail classes and it can feel very detrimental when you've been that AB student. I was like, believe me, I've done it
Yeah.
like multiple times. And the first thing they said, they were like, but you got a doctor. I'm like, yeah, nothing ever really truly is cut off from you. I'm like, there's always other ways. It's just all in what matters to you and like pick yourself up and keep it moving. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I have failed classes. I also stand before you with a doctorate. You're not done until you say you're done. You can
Mm-hmm.
ask, you can push, but you have to advocate for yourself. I'm like, get nothing in this world unless you ask. So always ask, just really set them up to like be adults in the world.
Well,
That's a big part of this job. Like, here's what it's like to work, but also here's how you like maintain yourself.
well, wow. It's wow, there's so many things I'm thinking right now. The
And I would say
What's that?
college cost is the cost of college is usually a big one for them because, and I will stand 10 toes down. It doesn't get talked about enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's all great to sign up for money to go to school. No one paints the reality picture the moment you graduate and you have to pay it all back.
Mm-hmm.
So we tell them like, hey, tuition is paid in this program. I was like, I don't think you understand how big that is.
There's an
It's like,
incentive there,
it's paid.
you
Yeah.
know?
And they're like, oh, okay. Cause now they're seeing it, they have friends in school and they're like, oh man, they have to pay like $8,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're basically just, buying you books and snacks and putting you, and you're doing classes. Like
Right.
it's different.
Well, I guess the question is, what's the reality, right? And whose reality is more, I guess, whatever reality you're in, because, I guess I'll say that I'm a big supporter of college, and the research just show that in the end it does, you do earn much more, right, than the person who has been to college. But there are also options, and this is something I think about. But listening to you talk about engineering, it almost makes it seem as if whatever we prepare them for in the K-12, we talk about engineering design, almost prepares them more for that practical side, right? And it makes sense because part of the STEM program, we have part of the project I had and provided peer mentors for students. And I remember one of the students in engineering needed support, and a type of topic she needed support lent itself more to I assigned a physics major, looking at things like thermodynamics, even if it's related to what she's doing. And so, yeah, so you're talking about the heavy understanding of the physics, right? Content. I'm curious as to what type of learning challenges come up for students in your program, if you can think of.
I would say probably one I've noticed is if they're not exposed to it before,
Mhm.
um, it can prove challenging to them because what I've learned, especially about this area since I've moved up, is there's a lot more engineering programs within the high schools than there
Mhm.
were in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And so a lot of them have kind of been exposed.
That's a good thing.
Robotics, because I remember when I got up here, I was like, I don't even know how I would set up a project because I'm kind of used to working on limited resources. And out here, they just kind of have everything. Like, I remember this is probably the first time I even worked on a breadboard for electricity. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, how does this work? And he's like, oh, you just put the pieces in. And I was like, wait, you don't have to strip your own wires and buy electrical tape and make your own circuits and like connect them? He was like, no. I was like, dang. I was really working on limited resources what I was doing before because I'd have to strip my own wires and connect them and recognizing they have that high level here. But then again, there is the building of things. Here's your direction, build it. And then there's twofold. What they're doing now is truly understanding the mechanics of why does that thing work, like
Mm.
what's going on behind the scenes. So this is like the two part. Yeah, I can build it, I can put it together. Part two, do you truly understand how that machine works in its entirety? Do you understand? Yeah, electrical circuit, connect positive to positive, negative to negative. Do you fully understand like the ohms and the volts, the voltage that's going through that system? Do you understand why you need to add a resistor to that system? Because it's all
Mhm.
fine to connect and do it, but now they're I would say getting that behind the scenes of it, like all the work to make that kit work. What do you need to know? That's what they're really honing in on now.
Mm.
Do you truly understand the circuit so that you can just plug the circuit in? Because everyone can plug something into the wall. What
Mhm.
they're really understanding is what is going on behind the wall. And they have to understand what's going on behind the wall.
Mhm.
So I would say that's the part that's really getting them to think because now it's like they have to fully understand the system as a whole and not just what it does and how it's working. Have to understand the question of why, not how. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a big part for them right now.
Mhm.
And there's way more parts going on behind the scenes. Like, for example, if they're going into data centers, like they really need to be an expert on understanding how they need to shift power because the power coming in is at such a high voltage and it's got to drop down through the transformers to a different voltage to be like a safe voltage. And so now they really have to understand power, not just, oh yeah, there's a power line and it comes in the building. Yeah,
Mhm.
but like what's going on in the power that's getting in the building. It's
Yeah.
really pushing them like behind the scenes to understand how do these systems work together. That part is proving it's challenging, but it's like,
Mhm.
you know, really gets
Absolutely.
them thinking.
That's always a challenge, right? Even in practical work, hands-on, trying to help students understand why. It also makes a big difference in how we teach and how we approach
Mhm.
teach, whether or not we're trying to have students understand why, for example, in physics, or whether or not we're just drawing diagrams and saying this is how it is, you collect this formula. A lot of
Mhm.
times, fortunately, one of the ways we weed out is um, giving them the what because we assume they came with the why, from high school, right? And those who came with the why and understanding from high school do find with all the what you're presenting. So I'm curious. I imagine that now with AI, right? That's where we are now. That there's such a bigger need to understand the why. I'm curious as to how that comes up because, I this is also one of the reasons I've been such a big proponent of that aspect of learning, right?
Mhm.
As getting to that point where students can try to figure out why something is happening. It takes problem solving, critical thinking, right? As opposed to them, you just tell them what to do and you do it. So I'm so curious as to how that comes up, especially now that we're, trying to combine it with AI, right? And programs are trying to figure out what's going on with AI. I do have some perspectives on that, especially when I see some of the implementation that's happening
Yeah.
now.
Um,
Does it come up?
I would say with this current group,
Mhm.
I don't teach any of their courses. So, aside from kind of what they tell me, they haven't spoken up about that as much.
Mhm.
But I will say, when you bring up allowing students to critically think, when I was working with the Boys and Girls Club, that was always kind of like my phase two. Because when students would come in and how we would set up our work is we would do like a long term project over time. And a lot of students weren't used to it. They're like, "Aren't we just supposed to put it together and be done?" I said, "No, you are going to do your research. You are going to make a prototype, and then you are going to get some feedback, and then we will execute, because that is how the real world is going to work." I was like, "Some of you are going to have plans. The plans won't work." I said, "That's normal. So you need a backup." So as students would come through and do that, they built an understanding of, oh, this is actually how building a project works. Because, we would work with them for at least a year.
Mhm.
And if they were new, it felt like, oh my God, this project is taking forever. And I'm like, the project's not taking forever. You're just, for the first time, actually going through the whole process of building the project. You usually catch it at the consumer side where it's just, here's the thing, put it together. I said, all of us together are going to go through the whole process. And so with my work with Dr. Edna Ton at University of North Carolina at Greensboro, one of our last big projects was kind of building this stage, because the group of students I had, because this is our teen program, because I had already worked with them for about a year or two, each kid, they understand that process now. So for a lot of them, when I say, okay, we need to do some research, they're like, oh yeah, okay, we got it. But like year one, when we first tried it, they're like, what do I even look up? And so, I told them like, all right, we're going to build a stage. What do you think you need to build a stage? Like, where would you start? Let's just brainstorm. I was like, this is how projects get done. What would you need to know? And they're like, well, I think we're going to need measurements. I was like, yep, dimensions, write it down. So we,
Mhm.
on this huge, like, poster paper, I'd be like, dimensions, what else are we going to need to know? Anything you think we need to know to do this? So we can assess a plan. And, they'd come up with things like, oh, I think we're going to need wood. I was like, all right, so wood prices, all of that. Because I think when certain students are limited to just certain aspects of the project, that's usually mainly execution.
Mhm.
All this grand work that goes in the background, they can just lose it. And I get it. All projects don't allow for that because of time.
Mhm.
But the benefit of our program was, we were meeting weekly for a year. We have the time to really execute and take them through the process. One of the things I was looking at was, what usually doesn't get talked about is the decisions being made behind the scenes so students can have these experiences.
Mhm.
I'm like, as educators, I was like, really, my job is just to kind of stay two steps ahead of them, but
Mhm.
they need to experience it. I don't want to just tell them,
Mhm.
hey, it's going to be an 8 foot by 20 foot, and this is why we're doing it. Like, them to also come to that conclusion. Because what I found is usually they would come to the same conclusions that I already knew. I just wasn't upfrontly telling them. I would give them the chance to do some work.
Mhm.
And, so they did they found everything they needed to know. And I said, all right, we're on research now. iPads going out. Tell me what you're finding. And,
Mm-hmm.
the advantage was, they had worked with me before. So they're like, this plan is cool, but I think this one might be too expensive for what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought this plan worked better. And I vividly remember where it really showed up for them was when they built their prototypes. Because I said, we have to make a foundation for the stage. What do you think that foundation needs to look like based off your research of what you found?
Mm-hmm.
And they split into like a girl group and a boy group. And the girls took on more of a bed frame. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I feel like we need a bed frame. So that was kind of this like cross motion they came up with. And then the boys thought in more of a 3D manner, like, yeah, but we need more structural support, which they kind of thought the other team had the better plan. I said, when in reality, I was like, you both have the parts the other one needs. The girls have the foundation. Yes, that is what this is going to look like. I said, but boys, when we start adding in posts, this is the support we need. And, I also bring in other people. So I would, I'm the person running our makerspace, Matt. I would bring in Matt. And, he would ask me like, so, because me and Matt have already made a plan. So he's like, how do you want me to present it to them? I said, well, first let them explain,
Mm-hmm.
ask them questions, like really push them to think about what they need to build. And then, yes, leverage and offer your expertise. And then
Mm-hmm.
we can come to this final plan. Because I'm like, there's a way to do it where, you're not asking them to make plans and then say, great, you all did something. We're just going to do this. I'm like, no, we need to explain to them why is this happening. So for them, if anyone asks them anything about this project, they know what to say because they've been a part of it the whole time. I'm like, we're going to communicate. You're going to know what's happening. I'm going to know what's happening. And, when we got to the end, I asked them in the interview, I was like, at any point, did you feel like you always had say in the project? But yeah, we always knew what was happening. We knew everybody coming in. We knew what was happening. This is our project. They were like, it's ours. It never was one person. It's ours.
Nice.
Like, okay, good. Because, we had our plan, but I'm like, I want them to discover what they need in the
Mm-hmm.
plan. And so then when we started building, when we brought the wood in, first thing the girls noticed, she was like, oh my God, this is our prototype. This is our plan. I was like, yeah, I told you have the plan. We just need it more, but you were right. And she was like, I was right. I was like, yeah, you were right. I told you were right. You just needed more because they think, oh my God, the boys are going to take it over. And then, I'm like, don't give that much credit. I mean, don't get me wrong. All of you are smart. Don't give the other one that much credit. And then, the one little boy, he was our only white boy in the program. And I'd always have to like tread very carefully with how he was positioned because they would be like, oh, he can do it. He's just so smart. And I'm like, yes, he is smart. He is very focused. He is. However, he cannot do this by himself. He needs y'all as much as you think you don't need him. He needs you. He needs to understand what y'all are doing too. He can't do it all. But yes, I'm not going to put him down, but I'm understanding the dynamics. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, he is good at this. He is. However, he still needs to know what y'all know because y'all
Mm-hmm.
are y'all are working on this as a
Mm-hmm.
group. And then I think I had worked with him for about 3 years. This is my third year with him. And I
Mm-hmm.
asked him, I said, like, what's something you've learned since working with me? He was like, I've learned that I do have good ideas, but also I really need the ideas of others. He's like, I
Mm-hmm.
can make good plans, but also I see now, because you always make us work together. He's like, I see how much I need other people as well. And he's like, I used to just think I could do it. But he's like, no, I need other people too. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, see, he's telling y'all he's not better than y'all. He needs y'all as much as you don't think he needs you. He needs y'all for the plans. And they're like, I'm like, yeah, you all have something to offer. You all have
Absolutely.
something.
Wow. And you captured so nicely part of the goal of what I've been working on in my research, right? Just how, culture and society influences our perception, not only of others, but of ourselves. And we tend to sometimes overestimate what others can do and underestimate what others can do, right? And I don't have to say which we put on which end because it's very much played out in society and unfortunately played out in the way we feel about ourselves. Love when, I loved when I know when I was teaching high school, I would get placed with mostly taught the non-honors. And I welcomed it because, you know, I had the opportunity to, you know, show what students can do. And I remember as part of that, what I did when I found out what students were interested in, I applied for this program. It's a NASA program with SSERV, and I was a teacher mentor to them, and we had a scientist advisor. And so one of the things that ended up happening, we ended up having a conversation, me and this scientist advisor, because he was a senior scientist. And so he worked with scientists with learning as well. Of course, you know, I'm always interested in that. And so one of the things he said came up was he would always have to talk to, you know, the engineers to let them know you don't have to come up with these. And this is something you take through with your career. You think it's just, you know, kids in high school or, you know, or community college or college kids. It's professionals. You take it into your profession, not realizing that part of this beginning this process too is seeing what others have done, right? And so, and learning from it. You don't have to create everything from scratch. And the other thing we could take away even from what you've said is you don't have to put other people down, right? Who are different. It's such an important lesson. I think in our society, it plays out all the time that when we see difference, you know, we put it down, you know, almost, I don't know why. I guess it's to feel comfortable about ourselves, feel good about ourselves, or it's the only way we know how to express different, right? Instead of seeing, you know, where the commonality is and where it meshes. And so many lessons learned, so many lessons to learn, so many things to learn from you, you know, throughout all of this. And I've been writing down some questions here, and I love your focus on process. I mean, gosh, you know, it emphasizes something I talk about, focusing on the process, right? The process skills and the process instead of just handing things to students so that they can be a part of the problem solving process as well. But
They fought me on it.
I'm sure they did.
They were just like, "What are you doing?" And then once they get their final result, they're just, "Oh my God, I did this." You
Sounds
did.
fun.
Thanks for not giving up on me because I know I was a mess. I was like, you were, but you stuck with it. So
You know, it's interesting you said that because I did a survey actually in a paper I published. One of the things I did with my pre-service elementary and the instructional technology, I took a different approach. And so I showed them different ways to use technology and had them explore. I kind of threw them into it a little bit to problem solve. And so they did a little coding, scratch coding. And, you know, the challenge was, you know, can you follow the direction of scratch coding and stuff like that? Because I also saw how my son benefited from, you know, in kindergarten, he was doing scratch coding and he loved all the stuff and figuring it out. And then he started going in and changing people's games and, and all kinds of stuff.
yeah.
And then they did a whole bunch of stuff where I had them also explore NASA eyes because that's part of the course I taught. And then they did some of the engineering aspect. Interestingly, if I remember correctly from that survey, and I have to look at it again, I thought the engineering part would have been the part they liked the most. But I think if I'm not correct, and I have to look at the statistics again, it actually came up as their least favorite. And I think because in the moment it looks like they're enjoying it more, right? Because it's a simple project but it also had them, you know, there was a lot of questions to answer, a lot to think about. And I don't know why, but I just remember that was the thing that came up as the least favorite. I mean, these are non-STEM majors. These are students who are just taking a technology or STEM course, which could go in any direction. But I didn't want to do it where I didn't want to use the course to teach about platforms because I figured it'll differ from school to school. You can learn that from people. I personally speaking, and this is not to criticize any program, any person, but I just felt like, you know, how do I put it? I just felt like, you know, it wasn't money well spent. You're taking a course in instructional technology. And I know courses do that and it's okay to teach them that, but I just felt like, you know, if you're doing elementary to give you the options of things you can also do with students. And of course, the pandemic hit. And so,
Yeah.
you know, at the time I wrote that paper, I was hard to get, you know, to find people to accept that paper. And so I just put an independent, and then I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna submit this paper just so it can get published. I'll share it out. I do appreciate everything you've shared today. Because I've always enjoyed our conversations, just understanding the practical knowledge. It's something I go back and forth. My son is a great engineer, but when I ask him what he wants to be, he's like, oh, I want to do business, right? He'll sit down there coding, doing things, and he likes Legos. But then, and then he said, oh, and so it's, you can, I think, especially tomorrow, tomorrow's business person, I think, will need to understand some of that practical, knowledge and understanding of how things work, not just to be able to sell things, but to understand why it works, right? Because their needs are different. And so I want to sum this up and say, is there anything else you want to add? Something you felt like you didn't share?
Uh, I think if I had to just leave a note just for anyone, like if you're an educator or like have kids, work with kids, see them and see what they're doing. All that they do is not always negative or off task. Like if they are consistently doing something, maybe instead of attacking it, lean into it and ask yourself, like, why are they doing that? Because that might be the very thing you can incorporate and use to bring back to support them. So yes, see it, but also, ask questions. Don't take everything for face value, because a lot of these students are just looking for someone to like bank on them and
Mhm.
just show that they care about what they're doing and about them. Let's not always focus on the negative or like they're just always doing this. Like maybe lean into it. Why do they always do that? Because
Right.
you never know what you will uncover.
Absolutely. Completely agree. And often we are the limiting factor, right? And it's okay to not know.
Yeah.
The goal is to have big goals, and sometimes you just need to facilitate and see where it goes. And sometimes you need to learn. It's one of the things that's, it's a topic for another conversation. But do you have any questions for me? It's okay if you don't. I just kind of threw that out there. I didn't prepare you to ask any questions or mention anything. So let's throw it out there.
I don't have anything right now.
Awesome. Well,
But thank you for inviting me. I'll say that I always love sharing my story because I'm realizing like it actually does help a lot of students. They're like, oh, I feel like I'm there, and I'm like, yeah, sharing stories is powerful and it helps. So I appreciate the platform to share
absolutely.
this story.
Yeah, I think your journey is really important. I think people are really going to, and especially even college students. I was thinking as you were talking, it's like, oh, I need to emphasize, not just college students, high school students, just to understand that journey. As you and I talked about, it's okay to not always know. Figuring things out is a process, but also training to be independent and training to be empowered, a topic for another conversation, but it's very important later on for how you survive, parent perspective too. But thank you so much. This has been great. And I want to say to all of listening, if you like this podcast, please like it. Please subscribe to get the next one. And yeah, thank you.